Good evening. I'm Katie Hirsch, Director of the Halsey Institute of Contemporary Art at the College of Charleston. Thank you for joining us tonight for an artist talk with Jibade-Khalil Huffman, whose exhibition You Are Here opened at the Halsey Institute on May 14th. You Are Here is currently on view until July 17th, and the Halsey is open from Monday to Saturday from 11 to 4 and until 7 p.m. on Thursdays. So you've got plenty of time to put down a date to visit on your calendar. I want to take a moment before we begin to thank our members. I know many of you are joining us tonight, and I want to express how deeply we appreciate your support. If you're not a member and would like to help us keep providing programs like this one, head to halsey.cfc.edu/join. If you have any questions for Khalil, please send them to me via the Q&A form right below this video. And now to introduce our guest for this evening. Jibade-Khalil Huffman is an artist and writer whose video and photo works use found, archival material, and contemporary ephemera to address slippage in memory and language, particular to race and visibility. Lyrical strophes of text and densely composed imagery produce objects of perpetual flux, indexed by accumulating layers which challenge normative symbolic and semiotic hierarchies. Through projection and repetition, Huffman's work evokes the untranslatable, ruminating on the liminal qualities of singular experiences through narrative and graphic rhythms. Recent exhibitions include the Wexner Center for the Arts, Tufts University Gallery, Ballroom Marfa, The Kitchen, Mocha Tucson, Swiss Institute in New York, and many, many, many more. Khalil was educated at Bard College, Brown University, and USC. His awards include the Grolier Poetry Prize, the Jerome Foundation Travel Grant, and fellowships from Bemis Center for Contemporary Arts, Lighthouse Works, the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council, and again, many more. Huffman was a 2015-2016 artist in residence at the Studio Museum in Harlem, and he now lives and works between North Carolina and Los Angeles. Thank you so much, Khalil, for joining us this evening.
Thank you for that introduction. It's great to be here virtually doing this. It's a relief either way. I think I mentioned this at the end of the install, to not do this talk like right after the install, which has happened a number of times. So even in my like vacation mode, I appreciate there's been some distance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think on my end too, because as those of you, if you haven't been to see the exhibition yet, I know I myself go in and I've experienced it multiple times, and it's one of those exhibitions that I think you have a very particular experience the first time you're in it. It's very immersive, as I'll show you here shortly. And then each time you go in, you see something different. And so I'm excited to talk about it. And as you say, yeah, great to have distance and be in vacation mode whenever. So I want to first, before we begin, and tonight's format, I'm going to be asking Khalil some questions about his work and then asking your questions about his work at the end. But I want to first kind of orient the viewer to what the installation looks like. The exhibition is titled You Are Here, features 2 new works. You can see one of which is this is the titular work, You Are Here. It's a 3-channel video. You can see we are here in the Halsey's South Gallery, which you'll see in just a moment has been kind of completely transformed by Khalil's exhibition, noting the addition of a temporary wall there with one of the screens. And then the second work is Untitled Blank, these 3 transparencies on that are set behind these cutouts that Khalil designed and set into temporary walls as well, which completely changes the orientation of the space. So if you are a Halsey fan who comes in and sees every exhibition, number one, thank you. Number two, you will be completely shocked by how it feels to enter this gallery. So that's something that I'm really enjoying that Khalil did with the space. But you can see here, there is a rotating video behind, video projection behind each of the transparencies. And also a component that you're not seeing in this PowerPoint, but which is incredibly important, and Khalil and I will discuss, is the audio that's playing throughout. So to fully experience that, of course, no matter what, you'd need to come see it in person. So I invite you to do that. I'm going to go ahead and stop my share. We can come back to that, especially if there are any questions about it in the end.
Great.
But Khalil, I wanted to first talk about the, perhaps the most annoying question for an artist to be asked, which is about the conception of a work, but more than that, the evolution of the work. Because when you and I first connected some time ago now, it feels, you had, one of the first things that you said was that you were eager to flesh out some ideas, that there were some ideas that had come up out of recent exhibitions. If you check out Khalil's CV, he's an incredibly busy person. And so he had recently had multiple exhibitions, but there was something you were still kind of wrestling with, and you said, oh, good, I'm going to do it here. What was it that you were trying to work out?
Well, I definitely didn't know at that point. I think it was just sort of this large narrative that I'll talk more about, or try to talk about. I think when we first talked, and as that conversation continued, the more specific interest in the kind of the other part of this, the video game part of this, that developed. And I really wasn't, I'm pretty sure when we first talked, I didn't even have a console at that point. I bought a console in the midst of this very busy fall. I did, and summer also. This public project in Tucson, and then a show in New York. And right sort of in the midst of making that show in New York, I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna buy a PlayStation as this thing to just take breaks. And I'm starting to think about this project, but again, like, I don't even have a console. And just to briefly go back and say something about sort of my history of video games, my mom didn't allow me to have video games. It was one of these things that I only experienced like at friends' houses, so it wasn't like this thing that I, played as a teenager ever, played games here and there. But anyway, at 39, it was just like, I'm gonna buy a PlayStation. And out of that, this real sort of more specific interest and idea kind of emerged. But I didn't really know what that thing was, other than I wanted to really stop and really like flesh out an idea over like 2 years. It's been, I feel very blessed, especially during COVID, to have had a number of opportunities, things that popped up during like this Mocha Tucson project, for example, happened because, obviously the inside of the museum was closed. So they wanted to do something with this exterior, glass, using it as a giant transparency. And so, to make this thing for Tucson, and it's funny to not go there, right? But to make this thing that only was possible kind of because of this, that happened. But anyway, I say that to say that it's just been like this project after project, kind of jumping from idea to idea. And I really wanted to sort of spend a lot of time with this. And then lastly, I'll say, just related to video production specifically, it's been a really, not a real struggle, but a struggle at times, right, to make certain exhibitions, because as someone who makes both objects, light boxes, photographs, and video, I'm grappling with budget. And typically with institutions, I can do a bit of both. a more commercial show, of course, my gallery will pay for framing and anything that they can sell, but they're not going to give me money to make a video, right? So, you know, I sort of viewed this as an opportunity to really get this project going and to, you know, have this production span time to do like, basically will be a feature-length project across like 4 different institutions, because it's otherwise going to be impossible for me to fund in the way that, I don't know, some of these, I don't like, how do you get the money for this crazy, like Matthew Barney or somebody, you know, project, short of like, you know, crazy grant writing or something like that. You know, it's connected to just how I want to make the project over time, fleshing it out, spending time writing the script, working with performers, improvising scenes to build the script. And then there's the making of the game that's inside the video, which is not in the Halsey show. That's not yet in the material yet, but is going to be. And so that's a whole like learning coding right now that I'm doing. And I'm using this program Unity. And so just needing that time to make this project over time. Otherwise, you know, it'd be like, I wouldn't do a show for 3 years, you know. And I'm still, I think, figuring out like what exactly each one is going to look like. And so much of it is dependent on this kind of learning this new software and all that. You know what I'm saying? So I sort of jumped all over the place. Sorry.
No, this is good. That's what we're meant to do. No, I think that's so fascinating, and in particular to think of a work or body of work growing over a series of exhibitions, I think is really exciting. You know, so often you'll exhibit and then it's done, or maybe it's going to travel and then you'll have this somewhat of this, mostly the same iteration in different places. So I think for it to snowball off of one, you know, kernel, or to continue to build, I think for me is really, really exciting. And I know I can't wait to see how this, you know, how this expands, how you learn coding. And so in thinking about that, you know, are you making next steps as you create this work? Is it, can you see that forward, or do you just need to make what you make now and then take that rest and see how it's going to build from there? How does that process work for you?
It's a little bit of, I mean, I'm a writer, so it's you know, I just kind of start with the text. And in this case, actually, I just have like a script. I'm like writing for the first time since I made like a film in high school, and you know, had like whatever, what is it, Sid Field screenplay. It was like, you know, learning like screenplay form. And then I went to Bard undergrad, which is totally like experimental film. Doesn't necessarily, I mean, narrative filmmakers are part of that program, but doesn't necessarily encourage like it's kind of like normal script writing. And so since then, I've had these kind of like loose scores. I might not even share with the performers, but I know sort of, and then out of things that they do, I will, you know, more things will sort of unfurl out of that, or they'll suggest things. Yeah, so I totally lost like my train of thought, like where I was going with that around the question. It's gone. I was like,
well, that's what it's meant to be. It's a conversation back and forth between.
No. I had this like specific thing I was going to say. I'll come back to it.
It'll spring back.
Yeah, but no. Sorry, what was the first part of the question again?
It was about, you know, can you kind of see the whole project and say, I'm going to tackle this and figure that out later? Or do you make something, you got to get it out and then you see where you go from there?
Right. That's where I was like, I think I was going to make a point about that. So that's where this is, I think, so different. It's kind of this combination of like what I always do, which is letting so much of the work inform, right, what kind of happens. And you know, in this kind of improvisational space with performers, but because there is this aspect of it that I still haven't even figured out about kind of gaming, and not gaming, but like just immersion, and this experience that you're both like watching and passively in some ways, but also playing, this kind of in between, right, video and game, and I don't even know what it is yet, right? And people have, I think, messed around in this space, but I'm interested in something that I don't even know what it is yet, and that part, I just sort of have to trust and kind of make the space to, like I'm planning now, right, a shoot. I shoot basically everything in LA, except for some of this stuff that you see in this current version at the Halsey, was shot in North Carolina. But around that shoot, I'm planning just sort of space to really improvise with these actors, and then I'm in about 2 weeks I'm going to McDowell for a month, which I'm really excited about, and I'm just going to be writing and kind of programming that entire time, not shooting any video, just starting to really build the game on a very basic level, and continuing to write the script. But it's so much about just like improvising. Later, I want to do stuff potentially with like motion capture that I don't even know if it's possible. I mean, this is sort of another thing about doing it over time, expanding it. As it relates, I mean, I kind of touched on this, but as it relates to budget, right? Like being able to get to a certain point and to fundraise and say, okay, I've done this, and I actually need to raise an additional, $10,000 for motion capture for this essential part of it. And so it's not like a proof of concept thing. I view each of these exhibitions as a complete finished work, right? But like at the same time, it's this ever growing thing. And to answer your question, it's kind of like I kind of will know and I kind of won't know, and I appreciate that. And I mean, in some ways, that's how games are conceived. There's a little bit more fluidity. I mean, yes and no. I mean, you have like working with the performer, right? You have to have the script. You set up a shoot, right? You can't necessarily like change the script right before with certain performers. There's a certain like way you do that. With games, you can sort of. I mean, again, you have maybe a room of developers, but you can kind of change stuff like a little bit. Like how games start can sort of change, I think, more drastically than a film. Like if once the production of a film starts, the script part is different. So so much of this I don't know, and that's really fun for me, given that I've given myself more time, I think, and yeah, I think yeah, really just like trying to say no to things that aren't this project or making it part of this project. I got this like I said I was on vacation, but this like younger when I said young, he's not that much younger than me. But first book being published poet who'd seen my work, and another the publisher who's also a curator who has curated me before. They reached out to contribute a video for this screening reading performance to debut the book. That was last night actually. And I said, I was like, I'm gonna spend 2 hours on this and just send them kind of a draft of a future channel of this project, of our project. And I ended up, of course, spending like 3 days working like my normal like 10 hours, and the same. But it's like now I have this basically finished additional channel that like was almost going to be in our show. This is like the song that I had that I listened to as I walked actually like back and forth from the the like guest hotel or whatever to the space, and I kept like, because I was editing, you know, some of the last minute, some of the channels, and I kept trying to like place it and just like didn't work. But I found a place for it now, thanks to this, this, you know, side, two birds with one stone commission thing that I'm folding into the larger project. So.
Oh, that's really fun to
Yeah.
hear. I can't wait to see what the channel is and envision you listening to the song in between
I'll
moving back.
send it to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It like it works as like I'm gonna expand upon it and like add like video game assets, like, you know, just sort of moving characters on top of it. But it's sort of, it really works as just this kind of discrete piece. So. Yeah.
Well, my next question is going to be, I'm so curious to hear, you know, we actually haven't, I didn't even, video game is culture is so a part of American life or American visual culture that we hadn't even talked about the kind of origin and the interest of video games. And I'm so interested to hear you say that because I was also not allowed to play
Yeah.
video games, and kind of consequently as a you know, teenager and in college, I didn't really care about them because they hadn't been so, you know, part of my childhood, I guess. So I'm interested to know, with that in mind, you know, you're coming to it at a very late stage, and you know, with a whole different mentality and of course life experience, but there is so much that's been said about the psychology of video games, which I know you kind of will dive into a little bit. But knowing what we know about video games, and especially thinking about, you know, these debates about the addictive nature of the game and things like that, is that at all in your play in your thinking?
That's a good question. I think that the kind of like commentary, like, I mean, I in every project, even if it's not like there on the surface, like super legible, there's always this kind of like these footnotes, these like other sort of things that are there as like commentary, and it's hard to like explain how exactly. I have to like show a specific project or whatever, but with this, I'm still debating because I'm still fleshing out and developing the kind of the narrative and the script, right? You know, thinking about the characters and if I want kind of that level of it. You know, do I want to just have the motion, like the actual result of the motion capture, or the sort of the shooting of that and the kind of like production, and, you know, have that be this other layer? Because you know, in this piece that we have at the Halsey, in this version we have at the Halsey, I think one thing is is clear, whether or not you get what's happening or not, is this kind of layering and one person looking at another person looking at another person, right? So there is this kind of space for that, but I don't necessarily know that I'm interested, except as those kind of people functioning as characters. Like I would have some like developer, it would manifest in that way. Like I'm not interested in like some sort of like thesis about like addiction or yeah, these things that have been debunked about violence and, you know what I'm saying, et cetera, how it lowers aggression, in fact, and stuff like that. I'm not really, you know what I'm saying, that's not, the things that interest me about it, again, are this kind of immersion, this idea, again, of playing. That's why I think I am most into third-person video games. First-person games, I'm not as much interested in. But there's something about, it's like a novel. I mean, which is not to say that I don't like novels written in the first person. Some of my favorite novels, The Bell Jar, it's one of my favorite novels in the first person. Housekeeping. But the third person, right, what that sort of, in a video game affords you is both this kind of standing back, watching, you're literally watching the character, you know, behind their head, over their shoulder, but then you playing as them. So it's like this weird in between. It's that really interests me. And then, you know, I think out of the kind of game, again, that I'm interested in, the third person narrative game, there's already this like rich narrative space that has existed in gaming for years now, like in third person games from I'm going to mess up the history of this to any people who really know. But, you know, thinking about like Grand Theft Auto and just so many games that have these like intense stories, and you know, you can go on YouTube and just watch kind of these movies, and that, you know, they're of course recruiting all these actors doing motion capture and the voices, you know, you name it, not like Meryl Streep, but you know what I'm saying, major actors. The game I'm playing now,
the Meryl Streep in Grand Theft Auto.
I mean, I feel like I could see somebody like maybe convincing. She seems like she would actually, versus like, I don't know, Daniel Day-Lewis or something like that. You know what I'm saying? I feel like Meryl, with the right script, like if it was like, you know,
she'd be there.
Yeah, but the game I'm playing now has like, it's an early Emma Stone, like it's like early in her career, and she's like, it's bizarre. So anyway, yeah, all that sort of stuff interests me a lot more than this kind of commentary. I mean, it was such a beyond, you know, all the stuff I'm talking about. There was just, like I said, this interest in playing games in the midst of the pandemic even though it's another screen, as another kind of experience. And if I'm being honest, like I kind of don't want to like destroy that with this kind of like, I would say, more academic kind of thinking about it. You know, I'm primarily like a poet, but I mean, a lot of the kind of poetry I write is at least connected to or indebted to some, you know, theory, and you know, it's this kind of, in some places, you know, mix of essay and poem. So that is a space I'm interested in, but with this, I don't know what that critical thing will be, other than I think something really, really embedded in it. And you know, again, that relates to this as a also like narrative work, right? You know, that being different from pieces that are more like poetry and the kind of foregrounding of language, which you, in fact, in this version you have, because of how I'm building it. But the eventual later iterations will have sort of more of that. I mean, you kind of see it in the video in the two channels on the flat screens, but you know, this, how I'm shooting things is very much over the, you know, both in this kind of, you know, narrative film, but also how video games look, how cutscenes look, where you have this thing being explained.
I think it's very, very apparent. That was something I jotted on my note. Yeah, that there's a lot of watching and observing, and I wrote following question mark of others in the video. And I do, you know, because we had talked about exploring the use of second person versus first and third person.
Right.
And I also love that there's, even as you're realizing that as the viewer, the ground is kind of constantly shifting beneath you, because, you know, you never know which layer you're seeing at that moment, and it kind of pans back at sometimes, and we see people playing a game or we see people watching. And so it's kind of that unsettlement throughout, and that ambiguity is, I think, just as important for the viewer. But this is so fascinating. I can, you know, one thing I also think, just touch on the games one more time before we move on, because I'd love to talk about the installation process. But you know, I think so much of what you do, you know, we've talked about, you're a collector of visual culture, and that so much of your work kind of plays on the idea of what the viewer brings in, you know, their own foundation of literacy within our visual culture. And this idea that we know how to watch a video game, or we understand how characters move, or we understand how we relate to the character. So I think bringing that into the context of an exhibition is there's something maybe comforting. The viewer automatically understands how to read a work if they feel intimidated by, video, contemporary video, I don't know what I'm watching. Well, you do, you really do, you know how to watch it. So I think that's a really interesting layer in your work.
No, that's interesting. That's interesting to hear with this, like specifically because again, I'm still figuring this out. And, I usually have, I think, a more like steady handle on kind of what you just said, like the reaction, depending on where the show is, what the institution, you know what I'm saying. It's not even like about the South, right? It's like, you know what I'm saying. Just sort of like what that institution has shown, right, previously, you know what I'm saying. There is this like people can freak out, right? And I always want to give people things to hold on to. There is so much in, because it's like this poetry, there's so much in it that is just like obvious, and that's what it is, and you can just sort of let that thing happen, and the combination of kind of the music, what I'm having the performers kind of perform in that moment, can evoke just this feeling that it's similar to, I think, to reading, and reading a poem, and there's a particular passage that you feel connected to a moment that it's similar, you know what I'm saying. It's the same thing, but there is this like intimidation right around video, and even when people do like have these kind of references around video games and film, in this art context of like for a lot of people, and I get it, and yeah, I mean, I think that that's like what I'm trying to resolve in a lot of this, and I mean I wanted to actually touch upon, sorry, I'm like jumping into everything, but you mentioned about like the second person, and just that specifically, but it relates to what I was just saying. But that which of course exists in literature, right? The second person. So many great examples. The first one that comes to mind is The Virgin Suicides, which is a great novel, a good film. But I can't remember in the film how much of it manifests, but in the text, it's written and it's in this kind of collective voice of these young men observing these sisters. But in video games, that doesn't exist, right? There's first-person games, first-person shooters, which we all, or most of us, are aware of. The kind of third-person game I described, which is either like over the shoulder, like a Grand Theft Auto, or it's like it's like Mario, right? It's the same thing, right? Mario is a third-person. It's a platform game. It's the side, but it's the same thing. You're not seeing out of Mario's eyes. The second person, however, doesn't exist in video games, except there's this one game where you play this one mission in second person where you're like controlling the car. I always mess this up. It's like you're controlling the person, you're controlling a character who's then controlling you. I think I'm messing this up, but it's like, it's not what I want to do, but there's like not so much kind of dialogue around this, but as something that is just not, I won't say possible, but done right, in a video game. It's again this kind of like in between, and yeah, I don't like in fact know what that is yet, and how sort of active, right, the viewer will be. I mean, it's interesting, like thinking about and weighing this kind of collective viewing, which even in my like video art version, there's a kind of collective viewership that happens. People in the space together, even in COVID with smaller capacity, versus a video game, which you have these online situations and couch co-ops, but in a lot of cases, it's this solitary experience. So it's more in line with reading, right? And so that's this other thing I'm trying to reconcile, this kind of collective experience. And it's even harder. I mean, I have this interest in working with VR, and that's even more. I mean, I can imagine, and I definitely versions of this will have in the space like controllers, and multiple people can be playing the thing at once and watching it. That's the plan. That much I know. But with the VR, with the headset, right? Like, I don't know what to do with that. Where you have people running into each other in a room. Like, how do you do that? It's we see VR in a museum, right? It's like you're in a circle. Like some attendant there. It's just a different thing. So I don't know. I don't know if this is possible. You know what I'm saying? A lot of this. So
Time will tell. No, I think VR, especially within the museum context, is so fascinating, and
yeah,
a lot of people are, that there even hold VR museums, and it's not a world that I know a lot about, but I think it is really fascinating, and I'm sure before we know it will become part of our visual culture, just as understanding all these other elements is.
totally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's for me, and like that's never an interest. Like, I know at a certain point with, I mean, hopefully I'll be invited to talk about my work. I'm not, I want this to happen, but I imagine being asked like techie, like tech, what do you think about, what's your forecast of in the future? And I'm just like, I don't like give a shit. You know what I'm saying? It's like I'm interested in like our experience of narrative and like, you know what I'm saying? All, you know what I'm saying? So I don't know, there's things that I know I've waited for, like VR, right? For it to be more affordable, for if it's going to be something I make, at least now, I hate that it's like, you have to have a Facebook account. There's ways around it, but like the Oculus Quest is an accessible price for a lot of consumers. It's like the price of a console. That's a pretty recent thing, right? And so, like with that, I'm kind of like waiting for that to be, if I do make a work for VR, it'll be this kind of like individual like experience thing, and I would want people to be able to, outside of a museum, potentially experience that. And so, yeah. Anyway, I do not look forward to tech. Like,
A whole new thing. First you're learning coding, and then you're going to have to learn about that world. So
yeah,
I'll learn it through you. Well, one thing I actually want to jump to, I do want to talk about the installation. We will get there, but since we're talking about these kind of avenues of access of how people can experience your work, one thing that I want to talk about is music and the importance of the audio to your work, which viewers, I apologize you didn't get to see through my slides, but I promise you're going to want to experience it in person anyway, not through your screen. But so in the work, we hear a lot of familiar and unfamiliar music and sounds. For those of you who have already been to experience it, you'll note there's some moments that feel very familiar, like there's Whitney Houston, and a lot of people have a very specific memory tied to that song. I think about certain moments where I was when I hear that song, or the age that I was, or whatever. Soap opera theme song. And then there's a moment where there's kind of like a swelling score that I don't recognize it, but you kind of, as a person who's seen movies, which I know we all have, you kind of associate it with almost like there's a culminating moment coming, or it's like, pay attention, something is happening here. And then there's another that's like a sense of dread, and just these ways. For me, I think it's fascinating. You're allowing the viewer to bring their own experience through how they kind of read these sounds. And so I wonder, especially hearing you talk about listening to a song and wanting to make something with that, I wonder if you could talk about that role that music and sound plays in the work.
Sure. No, that's a good question. Well, I've always had this, I don't know, like, it sounds stupid to say, but like thing with music and in all, pretty much all the videos I've made, often pop music. A lot of, I think, my favorite narrative directors use pop music in an interesting way. I mean, there's like really obvious, like, I'm hesitant to even say, but like whatever, like Tarantino, you know what I'm saying. But you know, people like Paul Thomas Anderson, Sofia Coppola, we're talking about the Virgin Suicides, amazing use of music, and Scorsese, you know, and it sounds like obvious and dumb, but it's and pop music specifically. I think because of kind of what you spoke to a little bit in framing the question, you know, what the viewer can sort of bring to the table with their own associations around that song, and of course, yeah, just the kind of like obvious or not so obvious or like dumb or not so dumb subtle jokes that can sort of happen in these juxtapositions. Um, the use of the sort of scores, and there it's so just to like show my hand a little bit. Some of that is it's the what is it, Ligeti, the composer. I think I'm saying that wrong. But it's this song that was in Eyes Wide Shut. This piece that was in Eyes Wide Shut. This piano, ding, 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 ding. The Stanley Kubrick film, slowed down, and there's aspects of this soundtrack that will remain the same. I think the Whitney Houston is gonna stay in. Some of the score will change as I, of course, add in more video. I might kind of partly commission a score, and then I kind of mess around with like making sounds, and I'm not like John Carpenter, who's another amazing, who actually composed it, you know, made the Halloween theme song in addition to directing that, one of my favorite films. But you know, I work with somebody, but a lot of this will remain the same. And it's with the scoring, it's you know, kind of as you described, like playing up certain scenes, messing around with kind of expectations around that. And I think as the piece develops and becomes more playable, how those sort of cues function will be like different. Here, it's like this score, many tracks, but basically like, you know, the soundtrack. In this expanded version, you know, it's going to be multiple audio tracks, multiple obviously screens will continue, but the audio will sort of function in a different way, and be more like interactive and responsive to some, there's not stuff exploding in this piece, but you know what I'm saying, that kind of action. There's going to be this visual when I'm making like After Effects, this kind of explosion of the words themselves, of the text. So the text you see here, as the sort of characters progress, will kind of break apart or do something in this final version. But your question was about music. Did I answer all of it?
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah. Oh yeah. Just that it's, again, like I think, you know, it's like 60% will remain and like 40% will change. You know, they're not like holdover. They're just like, as the piece expands and changes, there'll be sort of things inserted into, you know, now it's about a 30-minute piece basically, and you know, in the end it's an hour, so it's like that scored and has to change. And I'm still actually on the fence even about. I'm glad that like you didn't I don't know if you've seen Eyes Wide Shut. Maybe not. Okay, so yeah. I like some people. I think will get that. It's that, but then it feels weird to use unless it's so like using like the Psycho score or something like that. You know what I'm saying? It feels weird to use like certain scores again. But yeah, I don't know. People
No,
play around with that. I don't know. Anyway, go ahead.
No, I think I need to post up at the front desk because I've enjoyed hearing people's reactions to hearing the music, or it's so funny if somebody's in the one gallery viewing Dan Esterbrook's exhibition and you hear the Whitney, they hear there's something, they're like, all right, I'm gonna go see that exhibition, I'm gonna come in this one first, and then they hear the Whitney Houston, I'm like, wait, what is happening in there? I have to go in there. And so it's funny, the different thing, just the different things that people use as a gateway right into sometimes a literal gateway walking through the curtain to your exhibition.
No, I like that. I mean, that accessibility, I like that. Yeah, I mean, I feel that about Whitney. I mean, Whitney, sidebar, we share a birthday. So I always I usually post even on Instagram. I'm one of those people that's like weird about my birthday. Like I'd love to throw your birthday party, you know what I'm saying? I'll be like so psyched at your birthday party, but no, like seriously, I'm really good at like iPod DJing your party, you know what I'm saying? The whole thing. But my own thing, I just want like dinner with my partner, you know what I'm saying? So I usually will post Whitney Houston as a not like it's my birthday, but like happy birthday Whitney. And then like my real friends know that we share birthday.
Well, now you have a lot of real friends who now know.
Well, yeah, now.
Well, before we get to people's questions, and thank you so much for your questions, we'll get to them in just a moment. I want to ask Khalil, I was telling him before, when you come in, you as the viewer and see the exhibition, you see this product that you're meant to see that Khalil has put a lot of thought into. And I know putting words into his mouth, but these are words that he's said about the viewer's experience, thinking about the viewer's experience in the space is really important to him. And I got to be, myself and the Halsey staff got to be able to see that. And I wonder if we can talk about the decisions that were made as the work was being installed, because modifications were made after, the transparencies were in situ. You were working, I know, to balance like some color and things like that. But everything is intentional. So I think, as probably people will know, but even things like having gaps in the walls where they don't form a perfect room for you to walk into, but that was intentional. So I wonder if you can talk a little bit, a peek behind the curtain at that process for the viewers.
No, sure. And I'll start with that before I forget. That was, I mean, so many of my decisions around like installation are like, 30% practical or something like that. Like I try to dream big, but it's like, okay, I can't do this, right? And knowing that those ceilings were what they were, to really create this kind of like tunnel, like more claustrophobic space, I would have just spent the whole budget like building and just making sealing that off, going all the way to the ceiling or something like that, doing the whole room. So I started to think about playing with those gaps and thinking about, that as space that you would, as a viewer, experience as you're walking around, of like this kind of breath and taking you out of this embodiment and illusion. And at one point, I was even going to put like more like, actual sculptural objects in those spaces, references, things that were actually in the videos. But space-wise, I thought that the whole thing could just sort of breathe better without that, and just function better with this kind of implication of that space. And again, this idea that you could look kind of behind this, that this is another layer of like you ultimately being outside of watching this thing happen, and then that's, you know, there's this unfolding thing within that, and then that character within that is watching another character. It's just this other sort of layer. In terms of the like the transparencies themselves and the designs of the walls, right? You know, I had some initial sketches. I mean, I at one point was really ambitious. I wanted to make this, like, I still am going to do this for a later version, but do this whole two-way mirror thing, which like involves like making this glass. It's the whole thing that would have worked much better with the entire sort of space being, the walls being filled, right? And, you know, I had some still ideas of shapes in mind, but then, you know, getting the transparencies actually there and saying, oh, actually this needs this shape, this ambitious kind of design, you remember the scribble, in fact, doesn't work. And thankfully I'm gonna use it for something else to like project through like that shape and that template, but it just didn't work there. I needed more kind of legible shapes, this circle, these kind of dots, and then this explosion. You know, the whole time I'm sort of thinking about the viewer moving through that space, coming in. So this is like what you see when you come in, and then you kind of work your way around, and the last thing you kind of work your way to is the explosion. All the while, the music is playing. You're aware of this, you know, more legible, you know, it's two flat screens, and then this third flat screen kind of off to the side, not, you know, cut out drywall. So you're aware of like something happening, and you see things, recurring motifs in the videos, in sort of both situations, but you're not fully aware. So you hopefully end up kind of going back and then sitting. But I kind of, again, imagine this kind of circle would happen. Yeah, so as such, you know, the video itself changed. While these two channels, I was like refining, changing around the soundtrack, the main like channels on the flat screens. If you go back to the stuff with the walls, with the other walls, you know, I had these like rough cuts, these like 4-minute videos, and then it's like, oh, actually this circle side needs more of literally, you know, iris dissolve, iris round dissolve, which is this like preset dissolve in Adobe Premiere, that is a circle. And visually, it like, you know what I'm saying? It's like one of these stupid things, but visually it looks like amazing, this kind of circle coming at you. So that needed more of that. The video in the middle needed sort of more smaller. There's this spotlight. There's like these, that kind of matches up with the small circles. And then on the explosion, like explosive, you know, green screen effect. So making, you know, tweaks to suit the shape, which, yeah, the one in the middle was kind of, that was a last minute, you know, because of this scrapping this, it was basically, it made a scribble in the drywall, which it's not gonna make any sense to anyone who don't have the drawing. But like a scribble with light, basically. It just didn't work. But so then I had to, you know, again, update the sort of video. But, you know, I'm always kind of thinking about, up until, you know, I have to give, you know, the head preparator the final files. How can I make this tighter? You know, so much of this feels, and a lot of it is, you know, it's like the two of the channels on the flat screens are synced up, but these kind of are, you know, different durations. They're running. You have different kind of combinations that happen, and I want that kind of like chance operation. But within that, it's like so specific, right? It has to be, you know, the whole thing can't be sloppy. You have to kind of like maintain this one thing for the other thing, I think, to function.
I had somebody remark to me who's visited the exhibition 2 times the second time they were like, is this different? Does this change? I was like, no, no, it's not changed. It's just, it's a different day. You've come in at a different time. And
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting. They wanted to know.
That's been a thing that I've always worked with from when I was making work with slides, and I had multiple slide projectors and they all had timers going at different speeds. And exactly what you just described would happen, like these different combinations. And I love that. I love that. Happenstance, whatever. So.
I told him, I said, I thought you'd be very pleased to hear that, and I was going to include it. No, thank you so much for filling in on that, because I think that's a part of your process that was so interesting for us to be able to see, and then to see in the work. And I think it's great for the viewer to hear about that as well. Well, I could just have 1,000 more questions, but I know I'll read some of the questions we've received. If you do have more questions, you can enter them into the Q&A field right below this video that you're watching on the Halsey Live page. The first question was, this person wants to know, what song was it? Will you tell them what song it was that you were listening to that you've made a new channel?
Oh yeah.
It's okay if you're not allowed to share.
No. It's like I don't even know if I will. No, actually that particular song will remain. I have to look it up because it's like,
okay.
I have so many like songs and like.
Well, while you look it up, there's just, speaking of music, while you're looking it up, there's another one that's not a question but a comment that's just saying, music, you're from Detroit, Motown heritage. Maybe somebody who knows.
Is that a question?
No, it was just a comment while you wrote. That was somebody had a comment.
No, I think you can't, not, that's, of course, that's in the blood. Absolutely. I've never been to like the Motown Museum. I haven't been to Detroit in many years, but I just love the Midwest, generally.
Well, all right. Well, so then I guess that person will need to wait to find out what the song is.
Oh, so the song is it's this electronic musician Peter Mannerfeld, and it's a track called Perspectives with Glasser.
Well, now you know, person who asked the question. Thank you for asking. I wanted to know too. Another question. Oh, this is interesting. So the scripts that you write, do you ever use the script as an object kind of beyond planning for the video? So I guess, do you ever revisit the script as anything beyond a framework for the video?
No, that's a good question. No, I've been working on this book. I've published like 3 books of poems. And I've been working on this book for, very, very slowly, for like 7 years or something crazy. Not that long. No, it's been about that long. Because my last book of poems came out in 2015, and I was like, that's when it came out, but the actual completion of that was like, 2014, right? It was like, it's not right before, but before that even, I was sort of putting together this kind of collection of like, kind of what I was describing earlier, the in between poem and theory and essay and performance. There's this piece I've actually done, will be not the centerpiece of the thing, but one of the main texts in this book. There's a piece called Defending Kanye West, which is a performance that I do. And it's one of the few, I also make performance, but usually I will give a kind of text, which is kind of this poem like text to an actor. I'm not an actor. I'm not interested in necessarily that kind of performance, except in this piece, which used to be called Defending Kanye West, and it's like about how I can't defend Kanye West given so many things, politics, yada yada. And so anyway, that which is again primarily a performance with multi-channel video will be in this book. And so I'm trying to figure out with probably, well, maybe this, because it has so much of this kind of the You Are Here kind of poem text. I'm trying to figure out how that might fit in this book. So the long answer to that question is I'm interested in, this is someone still making books slowly but surely, in kind of doing something, in translating that into this book form. But it has to be something else, like, and not just like images from the video. I don't know. So that's what I'm trying to figure out, what exactly that is. You know, with the Kanye West piece, that actually kind of works to have a few stills, just to have these kind of references that you would see, because it's a recurring video, right? It's a meaning there are parts of it, sorry, not the whole thing, but there are parts of it that kind of loop, and you see the same thing. You see this image of like Marshawn Lynch, the NFL player, dancing kind of joyously as a reference to like Black Joy, and that like repeats. So that would be in the book, right? You know, so that I can like reconcile, but it's something else that I don't know, like, yeah, similar to this video game project that I'm just like, I'm gonna figure it out in the next couple of years. But yeah, long answer to your question is I'm interested in possibly doing that in book form, maybe.
Well, you have a lot of things on your shelf to work. You have a lot of material to work with over the next couple years, which is awesome.
Well, hopefully, again, it's just, that's the thing. It's this project, right? That everything sort of springs out of it. And I'll do like other, you know, things. I'm working actually on a show in France that's going to open in January. At around the same time that the next iteration opens in Utah. And so for that, I'm making completely different kind of video, and, you know, like process, and it's more like purely kind of abstract in the studio with like smoke machines and stuff, and like models and spinning globes. I love that. I'm like obsessed with that thing from old movies where it's like the calendar turning thing, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to like recreate these kind of like sequences. So I'll like do stuff like that, but everything will primarily be centered around this one thing. So it feels more manageable. It's not like 17 things that are actually 17 things. You know what I'm saying? This is more like, it's, yeah, 5. You know, so.
I'm gonna have a trip to France. Sounds like, to be able to experience that.
Well, hopefully that will like travel. Definitely.
Okay,
So,
good.
yeah.
Well, that's exciting for you. Another question about the performers featured in the video work. How do you find them, or what are you looking for in a performer?
That's a great question. I usually just find them through word of mouth, just putting a call out, you know, looking for performers. You can kind of tell from the scenes, you know, there are scenes where I am shooting kind of sync sound, and I've made videos like that, but not so many. A lot of them, you know, a recurring motif and thing or stylistic choice that I make in the kind of like, you know, that video kind of making that you see in the 2 channels, are these kind of like repeated, almost like banal actions, these day-to-day things. And then within that, they're like disrupted in some way, or they explode in some small way. Some small rupture happens. So yeah, so I, you know, put out a call just kind of in the like community, like, do people know like kind of upstart actors, or musicians I worked with a lot, basically any gregarious kind of person, because I'm not making people usually memorize lines, and it's like, you know, video, it's like I'm telling you sort of what to do. We'll do multiple takes, but any sort of person that's going to feel comfortable. Musicians are great to work with, actually. And I love to work with actors who, you know, I've worked with my friend Julia Fry several times, who our actor, and all actors are great. I have such a respect for actors and the craft, like such a respect. If we had more time, I could tell you what is the most traumatic story of my life, but why I don't act. It's a good story, but we don't have time. But you know, I really enjoy working with actors, especially who, like my friend Julia Fry, who read a lot of poetry, and like there's this other level of reference. Not, I don't make it hierarchy, but like different reference that we can speak about, right? That like with an actor who maybe doesn't read as much poetry, you know, will have this amazing film knowledge, and I love that exchange. So there are a few like actors I work with, but mostly it's just, you know, kind of putting the word out, and it's, you know, it's pretty easy what I'm asking people to do, and I, you know, pays decently well per hour what I pay people. So it's like, you know, a fun. I usually, if we're working in an interior green screen set, you know, we got music going, snacks, you know, I run a fun set, and yeah, it was really great actually getting back to after a year. You know, shooting, starting with the MoMA iteration, and then expanding it here and working with some performers. You know, the first shoots, a lot of the stuff you see with the woman in like the white t-shirt in the like kind of older Buick, you know, was shot early on in LA, like back in like February, early March, and you know, I wasn't vaccinated. You know, I took a test, of course, and everything. It was just, normally I have like an assistant, multiple performers, but it was just me and her, and then the gentleman you see, Colby, on separate days, separate times. But even that was just such a great, like after a year, basically, it was like almost exactly a year from working with performers again. I really, really, like, I can't speak to that enough. Like, love that. I think it's just, I'm just alone, like on Premiere or Photoshop, spot touching by myself or writing, which is a blessing. But you know, for me, like you know, I'm like an introvert, but you know, I get like energy from these kind of exchanges, right? I really appreciate that, and so look forward to. I'm going to continue working with a lot of these performers that you see in the video. Angela, I forget her last name. Incredible performer, and she's kind of the main character. A lot of what I'm going to flesh out is going to be with her, and she's in this group the only like act. She's actually an actor, primarily a writer or half a writer, but she actually has like credits and so, and is kind enough to be in this video. So, yeah.
Nice. Cool. I can't wait to see how you guys work together in the
Yeah.
future.
She's great. She's great. But yeah, but Colby, he's a musician, right? He's not an actor, but you know, has performed and like, you know, is great.
Comfortable, yeah.
Yeah.
I can see that. That's interesting. That's really interesting to draw on that type of performer as well.
Yeah.
So the last question that we have time for is a good lead in when you were referencing shooting it back in February before vaccinations were widely available, which this question is, how did the pandemic affect your practice?
Great question. Well, as I sort of mentioned earlier, I feel very blessed in a lot of ways. Most of the things that I had, you know, in the calendar, either just were slightly pushed back. A show that I'm in at the Wexner right now, you know, got delayed 6 months, but is open. I think they just extended it through the summer. Yeah, the show at Tufts. Well, there are two things. I was gonna do what at the time, well, still is like the sort of biggest performance at the Tate in London. So that was like the one, and it's still heartbreaking. But you know, so many peers, right? Like lost opportunities. Their shows opened right when it hit, you know, and no one got to see that. And you know, my show at my gallery in LA, it opened in January and it closed, mid-February. And, I had this still amazing memory, and I hate art fairs and I hate all the bullshit, but of going, because I was in the freeze projects, but going there and seeing all these people, catching up with friends. And, the one thing that is good about air fairs is you see, curator, colleagues, artists you've worked with, et cetera. It's great, get a coffee with actually people you want to talk to amongst all this like nonsense. So I had that experience. My show got its run, and the Tufts show was not viewable to the general public. Only the Tufts community got to see that. But it's like even they got to see it, right? At least that was that. The curator, Dina, was able to invite colleagues to, as a special guest to come. So she showed it to people outside of the community safely, But other than that, I mentioned the Mocha Tucson thing. Things persisted, and I feel again very lucky about that. But it's been exhausting, and I think in a year of to use the cliche, unprecedented, yada, yada, to not have as much time as I would have liked to reflect and mourn. And I'm not even mentioning, of course, the summer of violence against Black bodies, recent violence against Asian bodies, you know what I'm saying? Like, this has been it's a fucking mess, right? And while I feel really, really lucky and happy, like so much of this vacation that I'm on is I'm trying to like do it now as like the space to just like breathe and think and about this year, because to answer the question, in a lot of ways, I mentioned not being able to shoot videos with performers for like a year, but so many other things just continue, my show with they now represent me also in New York, Magenta Plains, happened in October, and it opened, a week before the election, you know what I'm saying? Like thinking about that, right? The like January 6th, right? It's such a mess, right? It's been, again, this like feeling of I'm so lucky to be able to do this thing, to have in a lot of ways, one of the biggest years for me, like doing a project with, the first iteration of this project was with MoMA. I remember being a teenager going to MoMA, visiting New York for the first time. And like, if I could tell like 17-year-old me that and again, it's like COVID, it's virtual. It's not the normal version you do in person, but it's like, the cool part, it was up for longer. So the virtual allowed, I think, so many more people to see it. But this year has been like these amazing things like that, and I feel so blessed, But yeah, I want to like cry at the same time. Yeah, I'm gonna do that. Not right after this, but
wait.
Yeah, no, but take that space. It's important.
Right. No, I mean, I think if there was ever a time to use the word unprecedented to talk about a year, then this is it.
Yeah.
So for sure. Well, and great question.
That is a question. Yeah.
And I also well, I guess now we'll go ahead and wrap up. It's 8:15, and I want to thank you so much, Khalil, for taking the time to talk with us tonight. It's been, selfishly great for me. I've learned so much, and of course have so many questions. So I will be attending all your artist talks for the next year and just like dominating that question form with my own question. But I really appreciate you joining us tonight, giving us your time, giving us your thoughts. And to the viewers, thank you so much for joining us to discuss Khalil's exhibition, You Are Here. Again, do make plans if you have. I can tell some of you have seen it through your questions, but make plans to come and visit us before it closes on July 17th. And I also do want to take a moment to acknowledge that today on the 1-year anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. This is a very difficult day for so many. And so I especially want to extend my thanks to Khalil for joining us, and to those of you who are here with us this evening.
Thank you.
Well, it's been great to see you again, Khalil.
Yes, yes.
And I get to see your work every day, so I get to look forward to that. And I can't wait to talk with so many of you who are here tonight in the galleries. And do feel free to come up and talk with the staff, ask questions. We're very happy to talk to you about the exhibition.
Thank you so much. I appreciate y'all.
Thanks, Khalil.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.